Hello, welcome to another edition of Varsity360. I am Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, and today we're joined by a special guest. We have Jake Wilcox, the head wrestling coach at Evergreen High School and the organizer of what is looking like is going to be one of the biggest wrestling tournaments in Clark County for a long time. The Pac Coast Championships coming up December 21st and 22nd at the Clark County Event Center at the Fairgrounds. And first of all, thank you to First Pacific Financial for allowing us to use this the studio and the space. But Jake, it's been quite a few months, quite a few busy months leading up to this tournament. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going to happen?
Well, it's going to be held at the Clark County Event Center, and we're going to have about 12 mats and about 140 girls and boys teams. You know, I think collectively it's about 75 or 80 schools. Some are bringing both teams. But if you look at it from the perspective of a girls team and a boys team, we'll have about 140 total teams coming. So, to give context, I think traditionally it's only been about 60 teams. You know, last year we had 59, and so, well over double what we've had in any year past.
Well, for those of you who maybe don't know the history of this event, this Pac Coast Championships in Vancouver has a long history. Tell us a little bit about the background of this event.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many years. I know it's certainly been over 20. It was back when Evergreen had the filled house and they were able to host a lot of people, and it's extremely tough. I think last year we maybe had one local champion. The 3 years before that, when they last had the tournament, we had 3 local champions out of 14 weight classes, and so extremely tough competition between Oregon and Washington State. This year, I had interest from both Alaska and Hawaii. They just couldn't make it this year, but they want to make it. They want to be able to come down next year. So, but in terms of the history, it's been around with Evergreen for, like I said, over 20 years. I think it's close to 25, and the last several years has had to be held at a different high school, and then they hosted, like Mountain View has hosted it in the past, and then it's still been put on by Evergreen. And last year we had to do it at Hudson's Bay because Mountain View had gone through some renovations. So I kind of wanted to get it out of these neighboring high schools. If I couldn't have it at my high school, I wanted to put it somewhere else and maybe amp it up a little bit.
Because the name Pac Coast Championships, it really speaks to the wide variety of locations that are represented at this event. Washington, Oregon, in past it's been even other states. That again is going to be the case this year. One of the largest fields, let's see, the bigger venue up at the Clark County Event Center at the Fairgrounds, that's going to allow you to have 12 mats running up from 8 last year.
Yeah, that's right. And even those 8, we didn't have enough officials to run 8 at the same time. I think we started with 6, and then the following day we were able to run a second chance tournament. And that's something I had to get rid of, unfortunately. In the years past, anybody that had gone out the first day had a chance to wrestle back and do a second chance tournament. But I really paid attention last year to who was actually participating, and I found that not as many of the wrestlers that had gone out in day 1 were even involved in day 2, and of course, without having those wrestlers that were in day 1 that had gone out, not paying more admission and more registration, but only paying for the officials, it got tough, right? So. Washington State, did a little bit of history on the wrestling. Washington State was one of the first 5 states to accept and commission girls wrestling in high school. And as a result, we have pretty tough wrestling. I mean, Washington State's won the national championship before, and we're always in the top 5. And so I didn't want to miss the bus and not get girls involved. My daughter was an extremely successful wrestler. Locally, her junior year, was voted Wrestler of the Year down in Southwest Washington. Was a runner-up in the Reno Worlds national tournament recently. She ended up hurting herself right before her senior year and ended her career with a bad knee. But I'm a huge supporter of the girls wrestling. They're tough. They're real tough around here.
Oh, wow. I mean, just to look at some of the wrestlers that have come through recently, I mean, I look at Faith Tarrant, the junior at Prairie, and, going undefeated her first 2 year. And then I just presented an Athlete of the Week award to Nia Cassidy at Union, state runner-up. So you're absolutely right. This is one of the hotbeds for girls wrestling. And I think that's really exciting that now there will be a girls tournament at the Pac Coast Championships.
Well, and I coached Faith her first year.
Okay.
I was over at Prairie High School for the 6 previous years, and I coached her first year. And fantastic athlete, but a better person. I mean, I had never seen anybody get their competitors, their competition at state tournament while they're getting ready to weigh in, all come together for a selfie. And she did her freshman year. It was just wonderful to see, the joy she brought to people. And so when she went out and won it, I just thought, well, that just is, that's extra topping, but she's just an amazing person. So
well, and it speaks to that greater camaraderie among wrestlers that I think it's generated by the fact that everyone's going through the same, physical and mental test, and they know how tough it is. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so exciting that this event is growing. And it looks like this year's event is slated to have 140 teams from 78 high schools, Oregon, Washington, even as far away as Arizona. Or is that
we had some interest, right?
Okay.
We even had there's a chance that Blair Academy, who's over in Jersey, was they'd come to a tournament before in Washington State, but again, without everybody knowing it was going to be at this venue, they hadn't budgeted that money. Now that they know, like Hawaii and Alaska, they'll be able to fund it next year. But I know right now we have people as far north as Bellingham, 4 hours away, Pendleton. On Oregon, I mean, I think that's probably 4 or 5 hours as well. Yeah. Warrenton on the coast. I mean, it's all around Washington, Oregon.
Well, and it speaks to, you spoke earlier to the quality of competition.
Oh, man.
It's, you look at some of the elite wrestlers, the 175-pound boys division, the way I see it, you could have returning state champs from 4A, 3A, 2A and 1B. That's a potential. That's almost like a battle of the champions that could happen.
Yeah, they've talked about that before in the past too, to see who really is the best of the best. And I've been monitoring closely the tournaments that have happened so far to see where these wrestlers have wrestled, and some of them wrestled about 190. But for big tournaments like this, wrestlers will make a cut, right? And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. In fact, I spoke to one of the wrestlers, the state champion from Skyview, his dad today. He was asking, how things were going. I coached JJ Shane Line at club, and so he called in and said, what have I heard? And there's Lars Michelson, who's a Stanford commit from Bremerton. He's 190, 175. Who knows where he's going to land for the tournament? And then we got a state runner up from Toppenish. We have a two-time state champion from Granger coming, and these are all right in that same weight class. So it could be some fireworks. I might have to do something where those are the last matches of the night or something.
Nice. Well, this event, again, December 21st and 22nd at the Clark County Event Center at the Fairgrounds. Be sure not to miss it. It's been the culmination of a 2-year process for you. Take me back to when you took the reins of the tournament. It was coming out of the COVID era where this event hadn't happened in 2020 or 2021. Take me back to the last year's event and what that process was like to really resurrect this tournament.
Well, it was certainly tough because I was a new head coach. I'd been recruited to come and help try to turn the program around. The year before I took it over, they had pretty small numbers, dwindling numbers in terms of finishing the season. And so when I was recruited to come be the head coach there, I had to also understand that I was going to be taking on that task too. And so I was nervous, and I was fortunate to be able to reach out to the previous coach though, whom I'm still friends with, and he had moved on to a different high school. And we connected, and he was able to give me some of his resources, kind of give me an idea of what needs to be done. But my background is I'm a loan officer, mortgage loan officer, and so I do the marketing and the sales stuff anyways. And so I just approached it from that perspective and was able to reach out to vendors and even other schools to get them coming. And then I ran it in a way that I would run events that I run for my referral partners, my past clients, things like that. And the only way that I saw fit. I really wouldn't know any other way to run it. And it turned out that it worked out pretty well. And that's when I was approached. That was at 59 schools over Hudson's Bay. Now we were bursting at the seams. I mean, we had, there was bathroom issues, and there was always something going on because we were bursting at the seams there. So I was approached by somebody that said, hey, you really could consider taking this to somewhere else, and you can get local sponsors. And Waste Connections was my first one. They were really my main one. He had a connection with Waste Connections. Gave me Cindy Holloway's number over there, and that was off to the races. Once she said she was in to kick us some some funding. Then I called the venue and got it going, but now that went from a 2-month process of setting it up from before to this is a 10-month process.
Oh wow!
I'm making all the phone calls myself. And it's a handful, but man, it's knowing what I know now because of last year. I've been able to hopefully resolve any small issues. I really focused on the wrestler, coach, and the spectator experience. I wanted to make sure that when people come and check it out, they're not crowded. They have a place to sit. They have food to eat while they're there. I really wanted to make sure it was oriented towards the experience as a whole.
So what can people expect when they walk into the venue? What is the setup going to be like? What's the spectator experience going to be like?
So one of the things I did that's pretty uncommon, I think maybe people are starting to look at it as something to do more often now, but it's uncommon thus far, is I got a whole section set off to the side for wrestlers to grab their bags and go sit off, and they lay in the bleachers and relax and get ready to wrestle. In the past, they've also shared the bleachers with the spectators, which, and then I got grandma and grandpa up in the very top bleacher, walking up the stairs. And so, when you come into the event center, you're going to have, there's bleachers surrounding each one of the 12 mats. And then there'll be a whole separate section where the wrestlers can take all their stuff. The teens can take all their stuff. They could post up somewhere, bring blankets, pillows, whatever, lawn chairs, and sit out. And then that same area is also where we have like 20 concession tables. So you can sit and eat your food. So it's not just one of those things where you buy some food and then you have to walk around and eat it, or sit in the bleachers and eat it. There's concession tables, and so then we just have just wrestling out in the main area. 12 mats and 18 officials, and we're flying a couple officials in just to make sure we have high quality officials. One from Nebraska. We've had a couple of ladies from Texas to make sure. A couple of ladies that have done the USA wrestling tournaments over nationwide. So we've really kind of looked at every little detail.
Yeah, because those of you who haven't been at the event center at the fairgrounds, you have a lot of space there. It is a wide area. That had to have given you some flexibility versus a high school gym where you're basically confined in kind of a pit setting.
It did, for sure. I mean, we were able to look at how many people are starting to commit to attending, and then grow our mats from there, right? We started by maybe off with 8, then we went to 10, and now based on how many we're going to have, we're going to have 12, and then 18 officials that can manage all 12 of them. And then, it was only just going to be a little bit more, but I thought it was worth the money to get that extra section. But if we didn't have that extra section, we still would have plenty of space, because it's huge for sure.
Just this is kind of has been, and now with the curtain setup, will be again, really the Southwest Washington Hallmark tournament. You look around the state, and there's these mid-season tournaments. I think a gut check, those ones that really draw people. Just how important is it for the wrestling community in Southwest Washington to have that Hallmark event that draws people here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pac Coast has been around for a long time, so at least the name has been known, and that helped, right? Because when I was able to reach out, teams recognize the name. But what I like here in Southwest, I mean, it'll certainly be the biggest one that's ever been ran in Southwest Washington, without question. And gut check has definitely been a big one, but traditionally you take the toughest guys to the gut check. You really don't take your whole team. Even when I was with the Prairie, we only took like 5 or 6 kids. So it was a big tournament, but it wasn't as big in volume as what we're running now. Best of the West over at Pasco, they have a pretty big tournament as well. But I think as a whole, this will probably be one of the biggest ones that Washington State and Oregon State's ever seen outside of the state championship. We're talking about 1,500 or more athletes, and then of course you have 400 to 500 coaches. And so.
Wow, that's I look at wrestling, and no sport really in Washington State was affected more than COVID, or by COVID than wrestling was. It basically shut down for almost 2 full seasons, aside for a handful of tournaments. Just what do you think it has been about the community that has allowed the sport to come back so strong after being pretty much put in a pretty bad situation tournament wise or turnout wise? I go to wrestling rooms now and they're full.
Record levels.
Yeah, I just talk about what it is about the sport that has allowed it to weather that storm.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things here. When it first happened, it's really easy to think, if you're wrestling, you're touching each other, and of course that would give you more of a chance of contracting whatever is out, right? But they weren't put in perspective that like on a basketball court or a football field, you're out there for 2 hours plus,
right.
and you're exposed to similar amount of people. We're out there for 6 minutes and only exposed to one single person. So, us wrestlers can make the argument how we were the safest sport. And we tested 3 times a week as a result. It was tough, right? And there was parents that didn't want their kids to wrestle because of their fear of it. And but the wrestling community is a tight community. I mean, if I haven't coached football before, I look across the field and I don't want to talk to any of those football coaches. I don't know most of them and I don't like them anyways. Wrestling coaches is different. I talk to every wrestling coach. We coach together at club. If my kids were somewhere they were at, they would take care of them for me. Vice versa, they can come in my room anytime they want. So it's such a great community, and so we were able to stay together and stay strong during those hard times, and then promote as it started to open up. And now we have record numbers. I mean, I got 54 kids myself at Evergreen, and it ended the season with 8 the year before I took over.
Wow.
Prairie has 80. I think Skyview has over 100. I mean, these are numbers I'd never heard of in a wrestling room. So
I got to think a lot of that has to do with the youth wrestling clubs around here, getting kids involved early. If I'm a parent and I'm wondering what wrestling can do for my kid, what is it about the sport that you think makes it so valuable for a kid in his or her formative years?
I'm sure every sport would like to say this, but I really think that wrestling, helps give life lessons. A formula that you can apply to life in every facet. When I joined the military, it was something I was able to look to. The toughness of having to go through certain things in boot camp. I just thought, well, that's not wrestling practice. Or if I'm doing push-ups and we're getting smoked by our drill sergeant, I look to the next guy and I think, well, I can do more than him because, he doesn't look like a wrestler. So, and they'll stop me when he breaks. So, I'll be okay. I think that there's just a lot of formulas with, you're going to lose a lot right in the beginning. You always do. There's no way you could get into wrestling from the very beginning and not lose a lot in the very end at first. And so, you're on your back, and it's just teach you how to get up off the mat, off your back, dust yourself off, and continue to try until at some point you're the one that's getting the wins. And I think if you're a coach that approaches it that way, which I do, and which the club I coach at does, life lessons and teaching young people how to just be better people and learning the lesson of losing and learning the lesson of wrestling, and the wins themselves will come. Right.
Definitely. And then that continues into the high school level. What do you expect from this season in Southwest Washington high school wrestling? Obviously, you've got some great wrestlers at your team, but then around the county, it's good. The competition's going to be great.
So tough. What's exciting for me is I get to see these kids that were sixth graders, seventh graders, maybe fifth graders, and they just were they'd get beat up in the wrestling room, get beat up in the club room. And now these kids are the hammers. You talk about Simon over here at Camas, and Camas was came out preseason ranked fifth in the state for 4A. Skyview also has JJ, of course, Owen Pritchard, and they got these twins that nobody knew about that are going to make a run for state titles. They could have 4 state champions out of 14 weight classes at Skyview. Wow. We're extremely tough in Southwest Washington now because of the club atmospheres for everybody. And you have a SCAO, Southwest Washington, you have a Pitt across the river still, BMA up in Battleground. So it used to be when I was wrestling in high school back at Fort, this was many moons ago. You could only go to Pitt, right? Mm-hmm. And that was across the river. And if you didn't have a car, well, you weren't getting any additional wrestling. But now there's wrestling everywhere. And even if you're not going to a club, there's still youth wrestling just based on the high schools themselves. I think CCYF or CCYW is what it's called. Mm-hmm. W for wrestling. So there's a lot of exposure, and that's what's changing the landscape of the quality of wrestling.
Well, and I get the sense when I walk into a wrestling room, whether it's to interview someone after a practice or to check in, that when you have 40, 50 kids in a room, you're gonna find your people there. You're gonna find someone that's about your same skill level, or that can maybe even a little bit better than you and lift you up. Just what makes a special wrestling room?
So I'm gonna take my kids for example. Yeah. Both my kids started as freshmen in high school. They didn't wrestle any time before that. We didn't know about the club scene, and nor did they ever express an interest. And I wasn't one of those parents that was just going to put him into it. As a split custody home, I really didn't have the ability to just make him go somewhere, right? But once they both became freshmen, they got into it, and I attribute my son was in the state finals by his junior year. By my daughter's junior year, she was voted wrestler of the year for Southwest Washington, and I attribute their success not to me as a coach. I'd love to say it was me, but it wasn't me as a coach. It was their friends and their network and they socialized. They went to practice because that's where their friends were at. And so they'd go to high school practice and they'd go to club practice right afterwards. And they'd be practicing 3-4 hours a day because that's where their friends were. That's where they felt safe. That was, in their way, it was almost like, a brotherhood or a form of worship. Even if you in a Christian reference, I mean, they were just getting together and they were getting to be in a safe place, and they all had similar goals and work ethic, and so I think in the wrestling room you can really find people that I'm friends with people that I wrestled with in high school that we have no similarities in life anymore, but I still think fondly of them because we were in the tough stuff together.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really explain to someone who hasn't gone through the fire.
No. I mean, it's like boot camp, right? I know a couple of guys from boot camp that I will never probably talk to again, or if I do, it'll be about boot camp. We went through it together, and it was rough, and you just kind of form a bond.
Now, a Lifetime Achievement Award at Pac Coast is going to be given to someone who's had an amazing impact on wrestling here in Southwest Washington. That's Donnie McPherson. You coached with him at Escale, right?
That's correct, yeah.
What makes him, the figure that he is, and that he's going to be, or what sort of qualities will we be honoring in Donnie with this Lifetime Achievement Award?
Boy, so when I first took over the tournament, of course, I have all unilateral decision making, which seems like it'd be great, but it's not when it all falls down on you for accountability purposes. But I was able to honor him last year, my wrestling coach, and just for the purpose of the environment he created for me. I was a marginal wrestler, right? I mean, I made it to the state my senior year. I went 2-0. Wasn't great, but he always made such a positive environment for me that I was able to honor him as a lifetime achievement. He also coached in Greater St. Helens League for 45 years.
And that is Fort's
Bob Glafka.
Bob Glafka.
Yeah, he was there for 37 at Fort, and then he went to Hawkins for I think another 8 years. So, and then now moving on to Coach Mack. I mean, Coach Mack, I'll tell you what, he's impacted my kids, myself, and thousands upon thousands of other kids. And that's just the way his impact on them as a person. As far as his experience is concerned, I mean, he's coached the world teams. I mean, I've had Kenny Monday, Olympic gold medalist, in my kitchen eating dinner at my table because he's sitting there with Coach Mack and he's calling him coach still. Daniel Cormier, UFC Hall of Famer, calls Coach Mack coach, and so his resume speaks for itself. And he's also in the USA Wrestling Hall of Fame. But as a person, the way he treats every kid, whether you're a good wrestler or not, and if you're just new to the sport, I mean, he's just an amazing person, and he's won state championships in Clark County with Heritage, and then over in Portland with a couple of schools over there. I think it was Roosevelt and maybe Jefferson, and so it's collectively it's just the way that they train wrestling is what's changed my life, because I was a wrestling coach before I went there to Escale, and I certainly wasn't a head coach. And now I have no problem correcting anybody. They're doing. I actually just recently hired a 4-time state champion who was 179-0 in high school. He was like Arizona State Athlete of the Year, male Athlete of the Year, and back in 2015, and did some college wrestling, All-American. And he's in my room now. He's one of my assistant coaches, and every day I'll correct him. Like, that's not how we do it, coach. You don't want to put your head there. And he even says it. He's like, wow, I never heard it like that. And so the wrestling technique is just so elite when it comes to Coach Mack. But then again, you couple that with the way that he inspires kids and makes them feel loved, and it's hard to explain all of it. But I mean, there's no question that his body of work certainly deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Well, I remember a recent experience. We had named C.J. Hamblin our Wrestler of the Year, and he obviously wrestles through Escale. And normally what we try to do is set up an interview or something like that. And he and his brother said, why don't you come out to the club and kind of do the interview in front of the kids? And so we kind of did we got out on the mats and kind of did an audience interview in front of all the kids. And I thought that was really cool to see 6, 7, 8-year-olds looking up and I remember one of them came up to me and said, I want to be like CJ when I grow up. And I think so having having those role models for those kids to see, I think the McPhersons have done a great job.
Well, and it's something that they preach at the club is get in these young people's lives. Don't take your high school kids and just be a little clique over here. These young people looking up to you, get in their lives, talk to them every day. Hey, how you doing? And so we nurture that from a very young age up until they're the ones that are now having to get in the young people's lives. And CJ was my son's training partner.
Okay.
And so that's what also elevated my son's skill level. Was we went to scale. They became training partners. Him and Noah Messman, who was state champion over at Mountain View. So at the same time, CJ was a state champion, Noah was state champion, and Jason was a state finalist. And there were 3 buds that were training partners. And CJ still comes back and will guest coach in my room. I actually hired his dad as a coach last year.
All right.
So CJ's a great kid and a great role model. And actually it takes us back to the toughness of Pac Coast. CJ never won it. He lost the 2 years that he wrestled in it. He lost by 1 point to 3-time state champion over there from West Lynn.
Wow.
So it's a tough tournament. I mean, you could be a multiple state champion and still not win Pac Coast.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue to kind of wrap this up. Pac Coast, you moved it from after Christmas to now it is the Thursday and the Friday before Christmas. That window was that something that allowed you to draw more teams, or did you think it just worked a little bit better?
It was a little bit of both, right?
Okay.
So it was a little bit of after Christmas is tough, right? You got wrestlers that want to eat, you don't want to cut weight. I mean, I've been that coach with kids that were trying to still keep their weight down. And then also there were some things like gut check got moved back. And so we're going to have competing weekends. We ended up still, unfortunately, having competing weekends with Best of the West. I spoke to their head coach, Jake Covington, and we were trying our best to not have competing weekends. Great guy. And after we had already set it and I had to put the deposit in on the event center, he'd called me like a couple weeks later and said, "Hey coach, I'm sorry, my admin's making me move it." So they're on competing weekends, but really I was really hoping to get it before Christmas. That way it's over, I can enjoy Christmas. My wrestlers can enjoy Christmas, all the traveling wrestlers can enjoy, and then they can focus back on and get ready for gut check if that's where they were going. I thought having Pac Coast and then gut check and then whatever right after Christmas is tough. That's a tough run. And it's taxing, and since I'm in a position I can make some decisions, I just thought, well, I think this will be good for everybody.
And final question: in an ideal scenario, what do you hope wrestlers talk about after the event when they reflect on what this year's Pac Coast will be?
Oh wow! Knowing the minds of wrestlers, they're gonna talk about the toughness, right? Mm-hmm. There's gonna be, I think I maybe only had 2 wrestlers last year that even made it to day 2 out of my whole team. So they're going to talk about the quality of wrestlers. To some degree, when you start seeing the semis and the finals, and if you're a fan of wrestling, this is like celebrities. I mean, to know who's going to be there, I want to watch these matches. So they're going to talk about the toughness of competition, and then again, knowing the wrestling mind, they're going to talk about the food. We have a couple of food trucks that are located out on the side, and then the concessions are being ran by Mark Matthias, the owner of Beaches. So these are real concessions, and wrestlers have an unhealthy relationship with food. So they're going to talk about the food options available to them and the toughness of wrestling, I think.
Awesome. Well, once again, Pac Coast Championships, Clark County Event Center at the Fairgrounds. Day 1, Thursday, December 21st. Wrestling begins at 9:30 a.m., runs all day. And then the big finale, Day 2, Friday, December 22nd. Wrestling starts 10 a.m., 4 p.m. That's when you break it down for the championship matches. It's going to be quite an event.
Yeah, we're going to move the bleachers around a little bit, and then we're going to get down to 2 mats where we have girls championships going on, boys championships going on, and 5 o'clock is when we're going to start the championship, and we're going to see who comes out on top.
Where can people go for more information?
So the Clark County Event Center is going to post a web page, marketing page with the flyer and that kind of stuff. We weren't able to create a website for it this year, but they're gonna do one for us. I mean, they're gonna be putting it on their marquee sign by the freeway, and other than that, that's kind of all the places you can find it as of yet.
Well, and we will be there to cover it. 360preps.com. Once again, Jake Wilcox, Evergreen High School wrestling coach. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you out at the Clark County Event Center at the Fairgrounds for Pac Coast Wrestling.
Yeah, thanks for having me.